Vanesia, living more Q&A. Today, we are deviating a little bit from the norm, rather than talking primarily about my world as a whole. Today, we are going to be opening up the topic of homebrew and how to write it. And if you'll excuse me for just one moment.
Pardon?
Sorry, my roommate is in the background pounding out chicken fillets, which I'm sure you can hear.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, then it filters it out, because that would be a little bit funny to hear on stream. Also, welcome. So everyone, welcome back, Kadre, again to the stream. Kadre, say hello.
Hello.
Fantastic. So once again, today we are opening the topic of homebrew and how to write it. I thought this would be a good topic today because lately I've been working on a lot of homebrew content for my campaign and beyond. Currently, between Kadre and I, we have in production a vast crafting system to overlay the entirety of my game. It is still in the beginning stages, but things are starting to look good. Lots of work being put into that. But I thought it'd be nice to perhaps discuss the process of creating and balancing homebrew. Now, before I get into anything too far, I'd just like to give a shout out and say thank you to Ian Fisher, whose music you heard on the stream and here in the background right now. Ian Fisher is a composer. You can find him at Tabletop RPG Music on YouTube and on Patreon. They were kind enough to provide the license for the music, so thank you again. Anyway. So launching into things. There is, frankly, so much homebrew content in my world that I really don't know where to start. So Kadre, do you happen to have any ideas where we should begin this?
Well, I mean, we could start with what happened most recently.
Sure. And you're speaking about the crafting system?
Yeah, that we were literally working on until like 11 last night.
Yes, I continued working on it. Little tweaks, not much progress, but, you know.
Sorry, 1 second. Just closing out one or two things. That is all. Sorry.
One Mississippi.
Mer.
Fabulous. Well, I'll go ahead and launch into
Yes.
talking about it a little bit. So, it was my belief, starting from the beginning, it was my belief that the system of D&D is lacking in the aspect of crafting. I mean, we have Xanathar's Guide to everything, for sure, but like the toolkits that are put into this game are very lackluster, and even when you got the Xanathar's expansion, most of the time it gave a very rough idea of how to set DCs for crafting items and perhaps the gold cost and time, but if anything, it just kind of ended up a little bit boring in my mind. So this all began because Kadre here has been getting into all kinds of crafting. Now, it started out with Magitech. Magitech is a big facet of my world, something growing in the setting. And he wanted his character to have knowledge in that and be able to build it. Well, you know what, actually, Kadre, can you remind me what all crafting sets you have? Because I forget at this point. Are you still there?
Yeah. Yes, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Okay. Good. Let's see. I've got currently I've got Smith's tools. I actually have the paper here. I have Magitech tools.
I think you have Tinker's tools in there somewhere, right?
I think that's kind of like part of Magitech tools. I think that's like a kind of the Magitech tools are like a strange hybrid between like an enchanter's kit and a tinker's kit.
Right. Yeah.
It's a little odd. And then sorry, I'm literally trying to read my own messy, horrible handwriting.
I know the feeling.
Thieves toolkit. Okay, that's what it is.
Thieves tools.
Thieves
Less of a
tools.
crafting set.
Yeah. Disguise kit, poisoner's kit, blacksmith's kit, chef's kit, forgery kit.
Oh, there we go. Chef's kit. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's everything.
Fabulous. Well, then actually backtracking, it started with the cooking, didn't it? I
actually had the blacksmith's kit before I got the chef's kit because I didn't actually have the proficiency for the chef's kit yet.
Oh, true. That's right. But like the crafting in itself began with like the chef's kit because you still haven't actually used your smith's kit, to my knowledge. You just
I think I made some bone weapons actually.
Oh, that's true, but that's your class feature. Anyway, so it kind of began with the cooking thing. Cooking felt a little bit lackluster. It's okay, so I can forgo the need for rations, but a lot of GMs, myself included, tend to skip over like when something doesn't add to a campaign, when it only becomes tedious, we tend to glaze it over because it detracts from the fun. And rations are often that, like, okay, well, we've traveled for 5 days in the woods, so now I have to mark off 5 rations. And I guess that I'll make 3 checks with my cook's kit to see if I can get any of those back. A little bit lackluster. So we turned to a fantastic little system that I found for actually making meals with positive effects for the party. And it has become a guiding facet of this game since then. Kadre is able to produce meals that have, frankly, saved the lives of the party in several encounters, boosting abilities, giving some temporary HP for the remainder of the day once they're eaten. And they cost gold to produce, of course. But this gave me the idea, why can't we have these little mini systems for all kinds of crafting? And so this crafting system that we've been building is kind of a spring off of that. Following the footsteps of this system, we are now trying to build a subsystem of crafting classes, wherein you will, alongside your main combat class, be able to take multiple or singular crafting classes and their subclasses, and in that way be able to produce items of various tiers, not just those found in the handbook, but ones with bonuses, non-magical bonuses above the level of that you find in the book. We have spin-offs from that. The enchanting system is kind of its own thing, but very much now we are kind of building my campaign into something that is accidentally crafting-centric. Now that I've gone over the basics...
Sorry, you stopped speaking, so I was like, is everything okay?
Yeah. No, that was the end of my statement. So that introduction to why this topic came about, Kadre, anything to add? Anything that you want to say about the system, or maybe a direction that you think that we should go in? Because this right now is a little bit nebulous, and I don't want to be just sitting here going, what should we talk about next?
Well, okay, so the main topic is about how to build homebrew stuff, right?
Right.
So, well, let's talk about our process. The kind of thing, the way that you and I kind of work. Because I mean, I know not everyone's going to work that way, but telling people about the way one pair of people or one team does it could possibly be helpful.
Absolutely, I agree. The process is a very important part of things. I'll preface this by saying, of course, that everybody works different. So even as we are talking about our process, this may not be a process that is conducive to you, but it is the one that has worked best for us, and for some friends. So the difficulty that I face in this topic is A, I'm really tired. And so my thought process is slow. And B, when I'm not, it's not something that I typically actively think about. It's just a thing that I do. So where would you say the starting point for our creative process is? Because ours are very similar.
I would definitely say, as far as when we work together, like when we work separately, I noticed that we both kind of have different ways of doing things, but when we work together, it's just kind of, it seems to kind of work the same way. Like one of us will say like a particular idea, and then the other of us will be like, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? And it just kind of snowballs from there. And then eventually we start looking into documentation. One of us starts taking notes, and eventually we start pulling out the Excel tables.
Oh, yeah, so many Excel tables. I'd say we both have a tendency, I will say this too, to write very complex things. And this often involves, I mean, D&D is full of tables, to be fair, but this often involves writing tables for our own creative process that then later have to be simplified, if they're simplified at all. I'd say that that's right, though. I'd say that we do, on our own, work differently, but together, when working with somebody else, we tend to have the same kind of process. Now, individually, because I know that a lot of the time when we work together, I come to you with an idea that I need help on. So, individually, like if you're working on any kind of homebrew, because you've made your own, not necessarily for D&D, where does it begin for you?
Homebrew for... Let's see.
And if you're stuck on that, I can go first.
No. It usually starts for me with... well, it usually starts with a problem or something that's unsatisfying. And so I'm like, okay, well, how would I fix this? Or maybe it's like, it'd be a lot more fun if we did it. What if we could do it this way? And that idea usually then ends up, creating like 16 other ideas. And it's like, okay, well, now I've got a whole new system that I've got to write down.
Right, yeah. Actually, that's a good point, because let's talk about when we tossed Tasha's Cauldron to everything into the system. Of course, for anybody that has played with Tasha's Cauldron of everything, you know that it added to the base classes some extra features. Most of them very small, but the one in particular that I'm going to point out is for bards, alternate magical inspiration. Now, everybody else in the party was getting a bunch of extra features to start out. Some classes were getting rearranged because we had a Way of the Astral Self and an Order of Scribes in the party while it was still UA content, and then the book was published and there were some changes made. But Kadre is a multi-class, Bard and Rogue, and he's not severely optimized for Bard. Not a lot of inspirations to his name, That is for the character. In real life, he's very inspired. And so magical inspiration. If a creature has a bardic inspiration die from you and casts a spell that restores hit points or deals damage, the creature can roll that die and choose a target affected by the spell. Add the number rolled as a bonus to the hit points regained or the damage dealt. The bardic inspiration die is then lost. Now, Kadre isn't very heavy on inspiring people. He saves it for his psychic blades. But he didn't necessarily want to miss out on a feature. He felt like it was one that would be underwhelming, that he would never use. So here we started with a problem. I don't like this feature. Then we built from there, and we went back and forth a little bit and started to discuss, well, how could we make a feature that wouldn't throw the balance off majorly, or at least would make things interesting, that you could still utilize. And so we ended up with a Homebrew rule edition for alternate magical inspiration, wherein you can instead, as a bard, spend inspiration on a spell to swap a saving throw to a spell attack roll, and add your inspiration die to one of the targets. Problem solved. I went on a bit of a ramble for that one, but I feel like it's a good example. This is how a lot of Homebrew comes about in my setting. You still there? Alright, well, Kadre is going to have to step away for just a minute or two. But not to worry, I can continue to talk about some other interesting items. So, let's talk then about my own Homebrew process. Now, oftentimes it does start like this. We start with a problem or something that is lackluster, and it develops from there. I ask myself the question of how can we fix this, and then I begin to build, and then I ask myself the question of how can we make this balanced. It goes 1 and then 2. But additionally, a lot of the time I just begin the process with an entirely nebulous idea. When building Homebrew, I think for people that may be starting into the field of building your own Homebrew, something to keep in mind is that not everything that you make is going to be successful. About a third to 2/3 of the content that I make, I abandon or throw away because it ends up as I just understand that it will not ever work out in the setting or in balance. Scrap it and start over. That sort of thing. That's completely fine. It's flexing your muscles. It's working out. It is building that intuition for balance and for your own creative process. Sometimes, rather than a solid idea, I'll even just start with something like a name. And this is something that a friend of mine has done several times. I have a friend named Raz, who, and I will not name their server because they like to keep to themselves, but in their server they often post, or they had for a while running, these brainstorming prompts. Fantastic little thing. It was very exciting to take part in, wherein, as a prompt, you would just throw out a list of names, just names, and people in the server would then build items based around these. So we ended up with stuff like, I threw out something a name called Six Layered Starbrand. And we ended up with an item, an eldritch horror style brand that gets stuck onto your body. We had stuff like Statue of Protection, Alzaret's Blade, Travenon's Clock of Tranquility. All of these things, nothing more than just names that were thrown into the ether, and from there, even as little as a name can inspire you to begin to write. Also, hello there, Foxy. I can see you sitting right over there. Thank you for joining the stream. And yes, definitely, it is sharpening your ability to do the thing. People underestimate failure as a part of the learning process. Which I'll talk about that in terms of systems that I've written in a bit, because that is something that I subscribe to strongly. Never be afraid to fail during the creative process, especially. It's the way that you learn, it's the way that you build. With 5e, a lot of the time, balance can feel just a little bit wonky. It's difficult to ascribe, to describe a particular way to balance things within the system. It's not like, oh, well, at this level, you're going to be doing this exact amount of damage. Now, there's a range, and even that's not always true. Some effects are just more powerful than others. In my mind, finding an appropriate balance for a 5e setting, for building your own homebrew content, items, spells, that kind of thing, it really is an instinct that you have to develop. You really kind of have to just spend the time building, looking at homebrew, looking at the system itself, digging your fingers into it, and understanding like the feel of when something is too powerful or too weak.
If I may jump in here, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I find that the best way to make sure that you don't make something overpowered is imagine if someone else was getting this set of abilities and you weren't.
Oh, absolutely.
Because then it allows you to view it a little more objectively, because then you're just like, okay, well, someone else had this and I didn't. How would I feel about it? And then it's like, oh, well, that would feel really crappy and I'd be upset. Then it's like, okay, maybe we should tone this down a bit.
Right. That's a big thing. See, I'm all for... I don't like to limit people. I love my players to be powerful and the things around them to be powerful. There are times when, you know, of course you have to say, no, you can't do this, no, we can't have that, because it would throw things wildly off. But rather than, you know, saying no all the time out of fear of things being unbalanced, what I prefer to do is, if something gets just a little bit too powerful, I rebalance the things around to be more powerful. So the enemies are more powerful, the rest of the party becomes more powerful. That was a little bit of a tangent. I apologize. My ADHD is wild today. What I was getting to say is, on your point, Kadre, when giving player characters, or even NPCs, that should be, you know, around the same level, powerful abilities, you have to be careful not to allow them to be constantly like stealing the spotlight. It's everybody needs their moment to shine. So when you're handing out abilities, items, stuff like that to the party, you have to make sure that one person cannot be like a powerful jack of all trades where it'll always be like someone in the party's like, oh, I have an ability to do this, and the person's like, yeah, well, I have the ability to do anything, and just, you know, can jump in and do it better. Because that's not fun for anybody but that person.
Right.
On the other note, though, of course, it is all right to have powerful abilities that are like disparate, where people aren't stepping on each other's toes, but where each of the characters has moments and scenarios where they can step to the fore and be like, all right, this is what I'm good at, now let me show you how it's done. Of course, you also have to give them those opportunities. Make sure that when you provide people with these abilities to use, you're giving them the opportunity to actually use them.
Right, and like to your point of the disparate, powerful abilities, and the point that you were making about making sure that no one can steal the spotlight, you can actually use like giving out of powerful abilities to, if like at some point the mistake was made where someone was given an ability that made them slightly too able to do too much, like having someone else be given the ability that makes them able to do this other bit better than that person can actually balance out the issue you just described.
Right, yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. Oh man, I had something and then I lost it. This is going to be a theme today of my mind just being scattered and losing all the things that I'm about to say.
That's okay. I'm a little harebrained myself.
Yeah.
Right now. Just...
The ADHD is strong today.
Yes, it is. We're both like.
Uh-huh. Gosh. Well, we don't have many people on and actually watching today. This is still going to go up on YouTube later, so I'm trying to think of how to divert this. Maybe we should talk about then.
God, this should be easy. It's homebrew. Like, this is like what we do most of the time.
Right. But like I've said before, it's like once you really get into it, once you really get a feel for homebrew, it's almost like an instinct. You don't really think about it. At least I don't. It's more like we do it and we just have the feel for it.
Oh, well, we could describe what that feels like, because that could be useful for, people like, do I have that instinct? Or...
Sure. If you have something to say on that, then yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sure. To me, that instinct feels like what makes this feel the most interesting. Like, what makes this feel the least like what already exists? Oh, here's a good analogy. Like, if you've ever done any cooking or composing music at all or anything like that, it's when you get like if you're making some kind of dish and you're adding spices and you get it to the point where it's like, oh, now it feels like I'm getting a bunch of different flavors. It kind of feel that same way. It's that feeling of like, okay, this feels right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And we do have a question from Foxy.
Yeah.
So the question is, can you think of what steps you took before you got to that point? Like before you got to the point of feeling effortless and off the cuff? What trial and error methods did you use or recommend? Good question, actually. So with trial and error, I'd say... Well, okay, so starting out, where I actually started writing homebrew was in other people's campaigns. As a player, I would write things and I would be like, hey, this is cool, this is something that I might want to do, and I'd hand it to my GM, who was an experienced GM, and they'd be like, that seems a little bit too powerful. So oftentimes that is kind of a good way, especially like if you're not a GM yourself, to get a feel, because you can see what kinds of things an experienced player or GM will reject and what things they'll say, oh, this is excellent, this is too weak, or like, this feels really cool but needs to be rebalanced. By leaning on other people's instincts, you can start to build your own. Now, as a GM, the trial and error methods that I used. Well, let's double back to the fact that I tend to build very complex things. I like to build whole new classes. I try to make them as different as I can from classes that already exist. New spells. That's another big thing is, when you are inventing homebrew, make sure that you're not just recreating something that already exists for the system. If you're solving a problem that doesn't exist, then, there isn't really a point. But anyway, going back into the complexities, when GMing, when I introduce homebrew content into my world, I often do it through NPCs. And the reason why is because this gives me a way where I do not have to step on my players' toes, hand something to them, and then later be like, that's not quite right, and take it back. By introducing it through NPCs, I am able to test it at my own discretion and remove it when I feel that it's necessary, either by removing that character or by tweaking it in ways behind the scenes that the players will not necessarily recognize. That's always an excellent way to do a review, because you can power test it in your world, take a look at it, and run it through combat scenarios or social scenarios that you may not have thought about, and then be like, ooh, well, here they can do this, which is like game breaking kind of stuff. A level 6 character can suddenly game this against particular enemies into dealing 100 damage, or they really flop in these social scenarios where this class is meant to shine, that sort of thing.
For me, it wasn't so much trial and error as much as researching structures. The first homebrew that I did was actually it was kind of stupidly ambitious, and I bit off way more than I could chew, even though I had a lot of help. Was a redesign of actually this other tabletop system's like casting, and I think some parts of the combat system. One of the first things that, if you do something like that where you like dive headfirst into it, is most of homebrew is like, or most game systems are these interacting structures. Like you'll have a list of spells, and those spells will usually have these specific stat blocks, and the stat blocks are usually constructed in a certain way, and if you look at them and read enough of them, you'll notice patterns, and those patterns can kind of help guide you in making sure that what you're designing kind of fits into that structure, but is also different enough to be new.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Trying to think of a good example that I can use for that. Do you have any examples off the cuff that you can think of?
Yes, actually. This is... I'm going to give one really, really incredibly simple example. And then I'm going to give one that's a little bit more complex. it's a new spell essentially, and sometimes it's best to start with really simple tweaks. One of the simple tweaks that I did, or one of the simple homebrew tweaks that I did that actually ended up kind of sticking in a campaign was actually in Maru's campaign with Atreya. And it was a new spell, and the spell, my character was named Ian, and the spell was called Ian's Last Word. And basically it was silence, but instead of it being an area of effect, it was single target.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thing is that you have to rebalance that, because if it just happens, then it's broken.
Yes.
What ended up happening is we added Brandon at Maru added a DC to it. So basically, it was like, I'm not sure if it was charisma or intelligence. I can't remember off the top of my head, but a simple tweak like that that requires you to think about, okay, if I change this one thing, what other things do I need to change?
Right. Yes.
And then if we're looking at something that's a little more complicated, we could actually look at. Sorry, I just blanked for a second.
That's okay. It'll come to you.
Well, actually, the tweak you made to the inspiration,
Yes.
alternate magical inspiration. That's a little bit more of a complex one, but it's built on the same base structure of it uses a resource and then it does this thing to your spell, which is what the original one did, but like you said, it was tweaked a bit.
Right.
And that's a more complicated example, but that's another way to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, and actually, let me double back to that because now that my head's a little bit clearer. So, since I may have been a little bit vague before, the issue that we were bumping into with the magical inspiration, and with Kadre as a whole, is that he was not particularly optimized as a bard. His charisma score wasn't super high, so he had very few uses of his bardic inspiration, but also spell save DC was low.
All of my spells,
Yeah,
all of them,
which
would almost always fail.
yeah, which can be a very frustrating thing. So the solution to that problem was, rather than giving him a feature that he would never use, was to build a feature that factors more into how he would like to play his character without completely breaking the game. And so, let me actually pull up the exact.
I have it up, if you like.
Oh, you do? Fantastic. You can read it out for me then. Go ahead.
Yes. Custom abilities and feats. Here we go. Alternate magical inspiration. When you or an ally within 30 feet of you casts a spell. See, I want to stop here because one of the coolest things about this ability is, instead of it just being Kadre, it's you or an ally. So one of the... I'll finish reading it first. Within 30 feet of you casts a spell that would typically require a save against your spell save DC. You may expend a use of your bardic inspiration to transform that spell, changing the initial spell save into an attack roll instead. Into a spell attack roll instead. If you do so, you may roll your bardic inspiration and add it to one of the spell attack rolls associated with the spell. You must make a spell attack roll against each creature that would be affected by your spell individually. If the spell requires saves on subsequent turns, the saves will be against your spell save DC as normal. To finish what I was saying earlier, I love the fact that it has an ally, because it allows this ability to be used in a support method, which ties into how the bard is originally meant to work in the first place, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. And we can actually, and I'm going to pull up my own version of it just so that I have it in front of my face, so that I remember things as I'm saying them. Let's see, where was that? Other homebrew. Here it is, custom features. No, it's not under my custom features.
I shall copy and paste it to you.
That would be fantastic. Thank you. since apparently I can't organize my documents for the life of me.
ADHD is strong here.
Oh, Lord. Yes, it is. So,
I know your pain.
yeah.
Lord, do I know your pain.
Okay, so let's... what I was going to do is actually break this down a little bit. So, let's talk about how it began. Now, I've gotten to the point where I can go through multiple versions in one sitting of, like, creating it. I can go through multiple versions of a homebrew that I'm making before I even hand it off to anybody or try it in my game. So, starting with the base idea. Base idea is, okay, he doesn't like magical inspiration. He doesn't like the fact that people keep saving against him. He'd rather be doing spell attack rolls. Okay. Version A is you expend a bardic inspiration and transform a spell save into a spell attack roll instead. Fantastic. Now then, I stop and I think about how that could cause problems in the system if I leave it just as simple and nebulous as that. Okay, well, if you have stuff that lasts an hour and that they make subsequent saves on, and you've got and they've only had to deal with, you hitting their AC, then suddenly it becomes extremely overpowered because it erases all of their abilities to save later. Okay, so then we need to fix that. So I add in the part about, after the attack roll on subsequent turns, if they would make a save, then make it against your DC. Okay, that fixes that problem. Problem 2. Here we are. The original... what is it? The original feature adds damage or healing. It rolls your die, and therefore it powers up as you continue to level up. This one would not, because it only allows you to transform the ability. So what do? Okay, well, we allow you to roll the bardic inspiration die and add it to the attack roll. Fantastic. Now how can that be overpowered? Well, that gets powerful for something like area of effect rolls. Yes. What happens when you have 5 enemies grouped up in your fireball that you've happened to launch, and you get to roll a d8, and there's a +5. So...
every single one of them.
Yeah, on every single one of them. So instead, you have to roll... you alter it to where you have to roll individually for each enemy that you would hit. Fantastic. So, that gives the potential for it to miss or hit individually, and you get to use your bardic inspiration die on only one of them. Cool. Problem solved. Now, the last thing is just flavor. As I stopped and I looked at it in the final version, it could have been just fine leaving it there, but then, we open up the fact that Bard is a support class, so... and this is very much not a support feature, well as the original was. So we instead add in just a little bit about you can do this for allies within 30 feet. Fantastic. Now it's back to being support. Now it's back within the flavor of a bard.
And it's fun and balanced.
Yes. Some people may not think that it's balanced.
Some people will not.
Some people will not. But I can tell you it's been used... having seen it used in my campaign, it is balanced for my campaign, and that is what is important.
Actually, that would be a good thing to talk about. Balance for homebrew, based on everything that we've seen, is very much about like your campaign.
Oh yeah.
So, if someone who isn't playing your campaign says it's unbalanced, and the key thing is not playing your campaign. That's an important phrase. Says it's unbalanced. If it's already in use and no one has a problem with it, and it's not causing, your players to like one-hit destroy social encounters or one-hit destroy combat encounters, what's the problem?
Right. That is something that I subscribe to. Because once again, I've given, at this point, all of the characters in my campaign powerful abilities, powerful individual abilities. But they do not break my game because I power up the enemies that you're up against. I raise the difficulty on social encounters. I turn this into an epic level campaign through and through. You guys may only be level 9, but you are facing off against enemies, against things that have abilities that can counteract yours, that are just as powerful as yours. And certainly sometimes you can circumvent them fairly quickly in ways that I didn't expect. That for me is fun, because I look at it and I'm like, well, I didn't think of that. This is great. That was an inspired use of the things that I've given you. I'll learn from that next time.
What was one of the unique abilities that you gave one of the other characters? I mean, I know some of Nithrice's. I think I know 1 or 2 of Aylin's.
Yeah.
And I think I might know 1 of Apusan's.
Right. So, Apusan's are still in progress.
Oh.
Because he's got a book now for that. Let me just put it that way. I still can't. He hasn't performed the ritual to decode it, but well, actually, he has 2 books. So I very much enjoy putting unique things into my game. I love a lot of the items that Wizards of the Coast has put out, of course, and plenty of them do feature in my campaigns, but I also love creating items and abilities that are very unique, specialized, or even very broad, have multiple uses. To that point, we have Apusan's Shifting Record of Ossaset. I think this is a fantastic item that has come in handy, that may not feel powerful at times, but can be extremely powerful, especially when searching for information. He has a book with the records of thousands upon thousands of long-dead Jaina. Inspired history that he can bring up on a whim. Now, it's a little bit random, of course, but actually, as things continue to go on, it's becoming less so. Because as you discover more information, as you begin to uncover names and tie things to them, you can name a person who has died, and information that they might have, and pull that up. This might be useful for you, Kadre, discovering ancient magitechnical systems, or it might be useful for the subplot that's going on. What do I call it? The Black Heart. Anyway, we'll move on from my rambles about that. My whole point with that was the stones.
Oh yes,
the Omelon crystals. Yes. He just found another one. In the vault of Best Thunal, and when slotted in the book, now the book can not only store books, he can insert them and allow the book to destroy them, but it can search through them for topics. He can name a topic, and it will pull up relevant articles from the books inside of it. This is incredibly powerful for a campaign like mine filled with lore that is important to the plot.
I need... Oh, goodness. Kadre desperately needs to give the Otherian Empire procedures to that book.
Oh, that would be yes. that would be...
Tell me about these regulations. Boom.
And man, I really want to spill the beans on a secret for the Tome of Ossaset. But yes, there's more stuff to come for him, stuff that is going to be unique and powerful. I'll just leave it there. Aylin, powerful things that are done for her. That is also a work in progress, stuff that she is still learning. But we have the moon runes. Those have been incredibly useful. Think about
The rock.
the stone that she made, where
That
she
used constantly.
yes, she inscribed the knowledge rune on it, and now all of you can transfer thoughts and knowledge by just touching the stone. And during sections of the plot where you guys were being potentially scryed upon, that was instrumental in subverting your enemy's gaze. She has repeatedly used the runes, and it's an expensive process, but well worth it, to create her little knowledge stones that she can just tap to something and gain knowledge about it. That's been incredibly powerful and useful. So you see, also, obviously, when we talk about power, a lot of people tend to look at combat, which is a fair thing, because D&D 5e, how it's built in the books, looks very combat heavy. The classes are almost entirely built around combat. But in the correct campaigns, social things can be very powerful, very unique, and very interesting as well. But also talking about the combat things. So the second thing for Aelin that's going on is I have begun to build for her monastic maneuvers, where she can spend key points for like special attacks and abilities. The current one, since she's Way of the Astral Self that she has, the only one that she's unlocked so far, is the ability to spend a key point to increase the range of her attacks. So she can strike from afar with her astral punches. And she has used that one, but one that's coming later that she knows about already because she saw her mother demonstrate it is the ability to spend key points to catch and throw back spells.
Oh, wow.
Now that's a high level one, so she's not going to see that one soon, but... And of course, you know now Thresa's. She is gathering the Espers, and she can use the Esper marks that...
To an angel.
Well, she can already turn into an angel. That's just... what is it? Divine Soul Sorcerer and
Oh, really?
Aasimar. Yeah. No, that's an actual ability.
Huh.
Yeah.
It just blended so well with everything else.
Oh yeah, no, she is fantastic about blending it into the character in the lore of the world. It's great. But yeah, with the Esper marks, she can unleash one-time powerful attacks against enemies. Those can be potentially life-saving for the party by spending her sorcerer points on the knowledge that she won't restore them for several days.
I mean, yeah, given the right context, that could be amazing.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Let's put it in terms of Bellius. She has the Mark of Bellius currently, which I homebrewed for her, and she can spend any number of sorcery points to summon Bellius and deal, what is it? A number of d8s in fire damage equal to the amount of sorcery points expended in a 120-foot radius.
Oh, wow.
Yes. There's a dex save involved, but...
Wanted to spend... Is that a spell or just an ability?
That is an ability. It's an action to do, but she spends as many sorcery points as she wants on that, and the sorcery points that she spent only restore at a rate of 1 per day. That is the caveat to keep it from being too broken.
That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Still, though, if she spent 8, that would be...
Oh yeah, 8d8 in a 120-foot radius. That's 5 times the size of Fireball and more powerful in damage.
Excuse me while I nuke the field.
Yeah.
Before I go, because I do have to go in like 5 minutes.
Right, that's right. You did say that.
I think it would be a great time to segue into homebrew items.
Yes.
one of my favorite ones actually is one that you made recently, and I'm not sure. Did you make the hand off the cuff, or was that?
Yeah, I
Oh my god!
not like in session, but right before we had that little mini session, I just
No.
I was like, I want a hand in here. I want it to be a hand that was cut off of somebody. What I wanted it to be, and I was like, well, Vecna doesn't exist in my campaign, so it can't be the Hand of Vecna, which is a canon D&D item, by the way. So let's make it what, the hand of a paladin of some kind. Okay, he and then it just kind of devolved from there. I'm like, okay, well, why would this be here? What's the magical item? Oh, well, it's a mark of a god. What god? Let's do Kaladin. He's the Lord of the Forge. Excellent. And then focus it around crafting. That's great, because all of the other items in here are all combat stuff, except for the clock. So it's nice to have one that is definitely not combat focused.
But I loved that item just because it was so perfect for that environment. Like, it just felt like it fit in like beautifully, and then on top of that, the ability was really cool too. It's like, you have expertise in smithing and you have these masterwork die. I was like,
Yes.
even if it's morally questionable, I want it.
Yeah, so now I've backed myself into the corner of having to create a whole crafting system so that we can, like, really make that